As an introduction to Queen Elizabeth's second from England funeral, I would like to introduce what I was preparing, what I had prepared. And I had titled God Save the World in relation of that topic of God Save the Queen. And let me allow to introduce some sort of history of humankind, because it's important. Maybe this is the right moment to introduce this, because we are dealing about the death, the funeral of a big queen, a real queen. And to begin with all of these, I would start nearly by the beginning, nearly because it's not exactly a beginning, because no one knows it. But let me start with what was the origin of civilization, the real origin, because civilization could develop mainly because humans had the ability to speak in speech. And although everybody knows that mainly most of the animals have this ability to communicate and sort of communication and even speak. And I would have to say that oral language is a kind of mysterious, because there are some animals that can even speak, even like humans, but it's not exactly a communication. It's not, what's happening inside the brain is not the same. No? This oral language would have been probably modeled from since several sounds, in several sonidos, sounds, ruido, ruido, yeah, and turned into articulated language, because a language is a sort of articulation. So, and it includes time, no? Because when humans include time, speak language, change it completely. And then the next step was written language. And at the same level that spoken language, written language, even in some animals have this sort of language of written, but it's not obviously written. It's not obviously an articulated, graphic, symbolic figure. But signals are a kind of this written language. Signals in trees, signals in stones are a beginning, a precedent of this. And after a lot of time, it was developed, and you can probably check in history, because there are some rest of that, because there are some poems you can follow in history that some of them are located in Asia, in Eastern Europe, in Middle East Europe, between Europe and Asia. And some of them are in small tablas, in small tables with ceramics. And trust it or not, at some point was a beginning of all of this, of all of written poetry language. And then we make a bridge until architecture, because obviously, in the same level that with language and written language, animals have this ability too, but humans, the potential is so enormous that there is not comparison. No? And then it passed from small huts to real architecture, developing mainly wood and stone, because there were the elements humans at that time had available. And they started to build, to construct in architecture. And at a certain point, when society, you can name it society, they organized in small cities, because they began with small local areas, small spread around the earth, the world, and they were local cities. But as time passed, that cities, some of people there, that obviously no one knows exactly where and how it happened, but they started to travel because transports were developed. Of course, the horse was the main. Without horses, civilization would be not possible. No? And then at this point, I don't know if historians have deal about that, but obviously have deal that about. But at a certain point, traveling would front with different cultures, because the starting of civilization was not located in concrete point in space, but in several parts of the world. And they started traveling around the world, but they found belligerent communities, because they were hunters, they had primitive weapons, and they were belligerent. So they had to argue and to communicate and to fight, no? And at that point, probably in ancient cultures, yeah, imagine, no? You can imagine a society that would probably have had a leader, had to move around, travel, and for instance, for traveling, they would needed most of people, several people, and of course, to explain it to the families, because if someone tells you, okay, you have to go over seas, over earth, over land, and leave your family, leave your house, leave your everything, and it must be dealt with special pintas, because it's not easy. And that was probably the sense of theater. I have not checked it in history, but as we are intelligent, you can guess about that, because there would be needed a space to explain the soldiers, to explain the people that it was important to go around, to travel extra lands, and to explain them. And of course, at that point, it was where and when money appeared, because it was not commercial issues. It was not commercial, but traveling and fighting and conquering. And at that point, the origins of mankind. You can have heard, you can have watched that are some of historians, archaeologists say that they are in Africa, but it's useless to go through that path, because no one knows exactly. And archaeological, for instance, some people say that beer comes from Greeks, I guess, because I've heard that in my country, in some parts, have been founded amphoras that they prepared beer. But you see, it's crazy, because someone, your neighbor, is fucking archaeologist that got his degree in a tombola, and says that the amphoras found it in the sea, in the sea, under the sea, that no one knows anything. They come from a beer production, and everyone believes it. But okay, then don't forget about that. But concretely, la cuna, the beginning of all of this, was Italy, in Italy. And but before, there were some inventors, some beginnings for that, and it was not in Italy, probably not in Italy, because the rest are spread in most of France, because what is called Gothics. They have built very big buildings that are cathedrals. No. At that time, they were not cathedrals, because Romanic and Gothic, they were not cathedrals, but they were a kind of churches, big churches. And well, these churches were trials, checking construction with stones. That was to test how big, how great could constructors build with stones. In France was the space, the land to test it. And then traveling around the world, ships, and so on. You probably have heard, probably have books where you check, but don't spend much time because it's easier. It's easier. They started in Italy, and they moved to Europe because it was not so far. And we had Spain, France, and England. And as that ancient people were really intelligent, not so much as us, but they were intelligent, small intelligence. But you guess that with those belligerent other cultures that could move because they had already transport, and they were always fighting. And at that point, that Italians should have thought that Spain, France, and Great Britain were good places to develop that sort of platforms to spread about the world. And at that point, strategy, because they were strategas, probably located in Venice, but not the headquarters. In Venice, there was something, because in Venice, there were the ovens, where they tested metals and most of crystals, vidrio. They tested that. It was, of course, if you see the strategy of the place of the environment of Venice. It's an island. And it's not connected to the earth, to the land, but it was a lagoon. So they could locate in several parts different things for tools, for weapons, and so on. And if you go to Venice, if you go not only for the carnival, fucking carnival with thousands of people per square meter, or cinema festival, you can see that even today there's an island that is from militars. It's El Arsenale. El Arsenale is already the arsenal for military. And even the astilleros, excuse me, watching Google, because astilleros, I don't remember the name in English, but were to design and build ships. The best are already in Italy. So Italians, not because of that, but because obviously Italy was the lacuna, the point of the starting point of our culture. And after all, there was Spain, there was France, and there was Great Britain. Okay, but Spain had a good location to move to America. Great Britain too, but it was different because Great Britain was isolated and was not easy to access. Was not easy to access for the belligerent other cultures. So they could develop there some other stuff that couldn't develop in Spain. No? And at that point, you have, of course, France, you have Spain, you had Great Britain. And then the strategy of all this movement was in France, they could be developed some other stuff. But we will enter in that, but they didn't no se dieron cuenta, they didn't realize that in France, of course, all of this was hidden. Now I knew about that at that moment. And but at that point, somewhere in France realized about that because probably thought that fucking great buildings in stone must serve for something, because not only for containing vegetables, no, or speaking with God. No. There was a trial, there was a test, and someone there understood that, and that was the starting point of French Revolution. A lot of time passed, but was the starting point, not exactly in 1789, but sometime before. And there was a kind of organization. Of course, there were other tribes, there were the Jewish, there were other fucking tribes, but it's not the issue now, because the Jewish were, in tribes from the desert. They were nomads, and how they became powerful. Probably they get inside cities with a relation with commercial issues, and at a certain point they entered in money, in gold. But it's a kind of strange strategy, because gold was mainly developed in Spain, because they moved to America because of the gold. And even you've got El Dorado in America, in several parts. You can ask the locals, and they will tell you that there were special places where they call El Dorado. Okay, at this point, we had England, Great Britain, we had Spain, and we have France, obviously Italy. Why Spain or Great Britain were the best to move to America? That was a strategy, because that Italians were really intelligent. They started the Renaissance. They were so great, architects, transport, and ships constructors, and everything. And they probably had a concilium, and some of them would explain to all of them, no, okay, the strategy is Spain, France, Spain, and Great Britain, because in Italy they had spread around the world, mainly in Asia, and Asia know about them, and they thought it would be better not to start with Italian culture to spread out in America. And okay, introduce that. Of course, Great Britain was in a good situation for that, and that was the sense why in America they spread to the north and Spain to the south. This was a sort of a strategy, because England developed coal, carbon y acero, and steel, how do you say, acero, hierro. It's between coal, hierro y acero, steel and, okay, you say, you're watching in Google. Between hierro y acero, there's not a clear difference, because it depends on how you treat that material. And that material needs ovens. And ovens, of course, were secret, because they were the mother of all. The mother of all. To know about the ovens would mean that you could construct tools, you could construct weapons, and that was the point, the issue of the culture, weapons and tools. And at that point, obviously, a great organization for all of that was needed, because to organize all of this was incredible. It was incredible. And the idea of kings appeared. I mean, they needed special areas, they needed special palaces, they needed a special infrastructure, and all of that. And this is the reason why I have introduced in this moment this, because we arrived at this point. We are in a funeral for Queen Elizabeth, and you have to know the truth about that, because if not, you are living in a fantasy, in an illusion. It's not correct. It's not good to live in an illusion, because illusions produced nightmares and some of other stuff. And at that point in Great Britain, we introduced in Great Britain because we are dealing about Queen's death, and Great Britain had a special landscape. A special landscape, because it's a wet, very wet. It rains frequently in winter, in autumn, winter, rains frequently, and forests were great, important. And God introduced some plants, some magic plants, and they introduce these disruptions to that strategy of human, because God is always doing this. This is always kicking. He's always está siempre tocando los pelotas, ¿no? And they would have to deal about that, and they imagined a kind of relation between religion and Protestants. Of course, it was all a mess about that, because they would have to introduce laws, because laws, you had weapons, you had tools, but you need laws, you need concepts to explain in theaters. You explain in theaters, but you had law, because if you didn't follow the rules, the law would code you and put you in jail, no? Because there were jails. If you go to Venice, in el Palazzo Ducale, there are jails. There are jails, and you can visit them. You can visit. Probably most of I don't know if Piranesi arrived there, but it is probably because he drew most of the jails of Rome and so on. At this point, we arrived to America. It was paradise, because it was so rich in minerals, but they were Indians, no? They were natives, and of course that sort of people, Spaniards and English people, would have had dealt about that. And if you look at history, you would get a mess about what happened, really, because the issue was the horse. And the horse, if you check in history, you would be thought that they come from America and travel to Europe, and it's crazy, because without horse, anything would be possible for civilization. So it was obviously not true. And then horse allowed to spread about around the world. And at that point, of course, you have movies. We overpassed the 19th century. We overpassed the republics, because that was another later starting point. But we are focusing in kings, and they will speak about themselves. So let them do it if they want. They will. And we have America, and then we have Eastern and Western. We have East and West, and North and South. But East and West were different, because East should have to be connected to Europe, and West not so much. And West was ideal to fantasy with cinema and so on, this stuff of fantasy Hollywood. I like that. It was that. At a certain point, train must be developed, because horses were good enough. But of course, civilization is intelligent, not more than God, but intelligent. And we developed trains. And England and Spain were very well located for that, because they had transport, they had ships, but they couldn't transport las máquinas, the machines. And it would have been an incredible times with everything moving, factories, machines, everything, no? And they started the train. And that was the issue in America, the train. If you hear about history, they will tell you that it was algodón. It was called well, algodón. You search in Google. Algodón, what they cultivated Negroes that came from America, most of them, because there was a slavery in that time, because there were needed handmade works, and Europeans were engaged in other stuff, and Africans were engaged in another stuff too. So this is not that some of them were slaves and some of them were captains. They were all engaged on that fucking stuff. And at that point, the Jewish would have introduced too, because the Jewish would have moved from all of this stuff, because in Spain they were kicked off, the Jewish, because from the kings, and I don't know what's happening in England, but hope they were not so kicked off. So I leave the English to teach me about that if they want. If not, do themselves. But in the city of London, they were starting the banks. No? It's why with commercials and the train. And at that point, of course, obviously, they would have moved to Asia. And that's why Great Britain thought about tea. But it was not exactly that, because the Commonwealth developed, moved from America, part of America, yes, I think, and Africa, South Africa, and India. But it was una cortina de humo. It was a curtain, a fucking curtain, because Australia was there and had nearly the same characteristics, and it was near Asia. It was isolated. It was big with resources, so it was a kind of laboratory, you know. Let the British explain about that if they want. They will not, but if not, it would be good enough. At that point, 19th century was a kind of jungle. We arrive at 20th century, and okay, it's a big resume, a big brief of history. And in time, at late 19th, beginning of 20th, we have the two main great wars. The first, that was mainly dedicated to draw in cards map, because mapping allowed civilization to interchange commerce with limits to all of that. And it was just fucking strategy, you know. And we are herederos of that. It's only on our world that, you know. And the Second Great War did not deal about that land strategy, and it dealt about technology and devices. The technology, devices, all of what we have found in the late 20th century was developed before the Second Great War. And on the Second World War, it is speed up in an incredible, because military needs need that technology, that development, and was motive that justified that. I'm not justifying anybody. I'm not justifying Germans doing that fucking not crime, I don't know how you say, but the Jewish would probably have known that and discovered that, and they would have tried to distort that. And Hitler, I wouldn't like to speak about Hitler, but they would manage to shut them up, because they were kicking, they were getting power, and was some of it too. Later on, we are to late 20th century, and we started with the internet. But we don't spend a lot of. I will not spend a lot of time on that, because most of you native in internet know about that. So I leave you to research if you want. But on this point, we arrive to virtual reality. Because I'm tired of speaking about virtual reality, but it's an incredible discovery. Well, it's not a discovery, technique or media, because it's media, and allows spaces, allows an imagination of space and time. It's not the first time I say, but I repeat it, because some people need to be repeated thousands of times, so I do it. Not thousand, I got tired, I'm not a machine. So we arrive at virtual reality that has an incredible capacity of narrative structure and possibility to be developed, space imagination, and relations will be an incredible speed up, because humans will learn to communicate, not only to communicate, because we have seen that communicate since thousands of times, but interact. because this media will allow to interact. And at this point, as we are intelligent too, we are us, and we have developed since time, lot of time, since pandemic times, where we were closed, we were in jails, and we were in closed apartments, we were everything, and anything. We started to develop Eintech, Sfida, first Sfida post-COVID. That well, before I would have to introduce this book from Ray Dalio. If you want to be a tourist of all of this, you've seen the title, The Changing World Order. Of course, there are more organizations that deal about that, that deal about future and what's going to happen with civilization, with our civilization. And Ray Dalio is a man that I follow in X, so you can follow him because he's always doing streaming and all of that stuff, and he's quite intelligent. But this book is very superficial, right? It's superficial because I don't know what you try to say, but it's superficial. You can check it. All of you can check it because it's interesting, but it's superficial. And then we have Eintech. This is Eintech. It's a kind of a Sfida. Sfida started in post-pandemic. It was thought to rethink about everything from thousands of centuries, but we didn't succeed. We didn't succeed. We didn't have support from anything. And that's reality because people are sleeping in good conditions, and that people with power are not sleeping. They are working. It's reality, but we persist, and we have developed Eintech. First of all, we have developed an after event that is a kind of fancy event, via World's event. Of course, you are all invited to NAFTA. That will probably be placed in December 2022. It would be great because most of the greatest artists of our history are invited. Even Ariana, and some of them you have heard about me, so I don't repeat. At that point, we'll reach to another organization. A different organization that is called CESCONF, that it was developed since the pandemic times, and CESCONF, it's a kind of different organization because if country states are territories, as we have cities and we cannot destruct all of them because we would be in the forest again, we have to deal about that. So we have cities, no? We have cities. It's reality. We have cities, although they are cities, we have cities. So we have to manage about that. And as we are intelligent architects and so on, we have cities. And CESCONF is an organization from cities, Probably some of them have heard about this, and you have heard probably about some other cities or organization, but they are not the same because CGLU that is located in my fucking country, in my fucking city, they have heard about that, and they have power and they have developed first. So we have must face to that. Okay, we have CESCONF, that is an organization of cities. And will be probably, that is completely new, I guess, because they copy like Chinese. It will be developed in virtual reality, People will have the power, the real power. It's not a song you have heard, people have the power, but it's real. People will have the power. At the end of this fucking history, people will have the power. And people will decide on, but people will decide. But it's not easy, because they must be trained. Deben estar enseñados para esto, because if you listen to lawyers, they say that they represent the punished people or los encausados because they are taught, because they are licensed, because they are taught of that. So if citizens want to become the protagonists, the ones that have the decisions will have to be taught, and you will not have to go to the university and spend 5 years doing fucking stuff. You will have to be taught to that kind of life. If not, it will not succeed, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I continue because this was well. If you don't learn to learn, you will not learn. You will continue in that sort of illusion, and the future is even happening at the present. So it's got stuff. And forget about this speech because you have to go to build your life, to work for yourself. And of course, you are welcome to an after event that could be a very fancy party with this artist. And we have managed that could be because we started in the summer 2022, but it was fucking the troubles and difficult. The infrastructure was so great, so high, so incredible that we didn't manage. We wanted to do in August, in September, in October, but we have thought to do it in December. Victoria di Savoia, Princess of Italy, was kicked off from the family was kicked off from Italy, and in London, I want to present this book. That is fucking. You see it or not? Because no, here. Villa Parco y Saboya, that deals about this. All of this I've been speaking in a very brief way. You know, it's I think less than 100 pages, and you don't have to have a library in your house. You can watch this and start. Throw it and jump to the point. No, to the point, no, but jump. Well, at that point, I wanted to present this book too, Esfida. And I will leave a contact if you want to get it. And forget about everything, and start. If not, we will continue in the same fucking stuff. You know, this is reality. All of other stuff is illusion. You know, illusion. So work for yourself. Don't be afraid, and throw to the future. Well, yes, throw to the future. Okay, that's all. No.